Jewish Historical Society, and we are having our first general meeting. We hope that if you have not become a member, that you will. We're selling lots of things tonight besides Judaism and history. I think that you noticed when you came in, we were trying to get you to take an envelope. If you're not already a member, we want you to become one. How many of you are already members? Hey, let's hear it from them. All right. I hope that when you go out, that the rest of you will make it 100% membership tonight. Also, where is Mr. Friedman, Shelby Friedman? We are so excited. We are selling these cards that are showing the Friedman's drugstore. What was the year? 1937. And as we were at the table, this woman came in, and this woman, Mrs. Friedman, said, "That's my husband's store." I said, "For that, I'll give you 2 free. But the rest of you have to pay 50 cents a card with the envelope." And for some of you that maybe already are done with your New Year's cards, you're out of them and you want to use them, this is history. Today is tomorrow's history. So it's a blank one. Thanks, Francis. It was located, you want to tell us?
Right afternoon.
Forest Avenue, now Martin Luther King. It says in the back, a sandwich was 15 cents, and ice cream soda cost $1. And Friedman's Drugs in 1937 Dallas. The store was located at the corner of Harwood and Grand, just a mile away from the fairgrounds where the Texas Centennial was being celebrated when this photo was taken. So let's give a hand to Mr. Friedman to come in. So let's see, what else am I selling when we get on to the real thing? Oh yes, Dallas Genealogical Guide that David Chapin put together. So those of you that are on the net with genealogy, you better get this because it tells you just what to do and what to fill in blanks. And the last but not least thing, I didn't know I was going to be a saleswoman tonight. We are co-sponsoring with the JCC during the book fair, the most dynamic one, Thomas Cahill, who has written The Gift of the Jews and Gifts of the Jews. And you know that he wrote about the Irish, but now we're having more than equal time to make you proud to be Jewish and to love the book. And we are selling the tickets for $12 a piece. And from that, you do get a little bit for the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. So we're begging you not to buy from JCC, go, but buy from us. So we got tickets too. Now, I've spent more time than I hope was not necessary, it was. And I would like to introduce Nancy Lugar, who's our program chairman. You're in for a wonderful evening.
This is our first program for this year. I break for Synagogues. Our next program will be Thomas Cahill, author of Gift of the Jews. He'll be speaking on how a tribe of nomads changed the way everyone thinks and feels. On Monday, October 26th, again, we have tickets for sale right back there, and they're going quickly. I do tonight. Our third program will be November 16th. It will be by Stanley Eli on growing up gay and Jewish in Texas. He just finished his book, In Jewish Texas, a family memoir that will be on sale. Pictures? He is a Dallas native, in case you recognize him. In January, we're going to do Memories of Forest High School with a panel on January 11th, which is a Monday. The March program will be Diane Plotkin, whose book Sisters of Sorrow has just come out. Then we have Jerry Crystal, author of A Light in the Prairie, speaking on Monday, May 10th. So we have quite a full program for you. Now I'd like to introduce Sherry Zander. Sherry was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, received her boy. Who is here from Wisconsin? Oh, that's wonderful. art education from University of Wisconsin, then master's credits in applied arts at Iowa State University. Sherry has taught adult classes and the children's art program at the Milwaukee Art Museum. She was the director of the MS Readathon for the Multiple Sclerosis Society in Wisconsin, directed special events fundraising and public relations for the Wisconsin Society to Prevent Blindness, was next a radio advertising account executive in Milwaukee. From there came to Dallas for the same reason, was introduced to her husband. Will he stand, please? Where is he? There he is. The two of them have produced a gorgeous little girl named Alexandra Rose. Rosie, everybody calls her. She was born in '96, so she was too little to come tonight, which is too bad. Sherry's artwork has been featured in many jury shows. Better Homes and Gardens, Treasury of Crafts, has her work featured in one of their books. Currently, she's on the board of a number of societies, the most wonderful being the one we hope you'll all join, the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. I asked Sherry how she got started in looking for unusual synagogues, and she told me that with her husband and her dog, in 1990, they were traveling through Ardmore, Oklahoma. I think she said it was a rainy day. There wasn't much to do, so Sherry decided to look and see were there any Jewish people in town, and found her first synagogue to photograph. She was hooked. Not long after, they were in Santa Fe. She did the same thing, photographed an unusual adobe synagogue. After that, it was a rolling pleasure for her. Her vacation time, and I think every spare minute, was spent tracking down synagogues, keeping lists, hearing from people about where she could find them, and searching for them. Tonight, we have Sherry doing Texas synagogues, and I'm going to bring her up now and let her take over.
Thank you, and I want to tell you all to keep in mind that when I started doing this, my intent was that, gee, in 6 or 7 years I'm going to stand up in front of a crowd and show these slides. This was just something I did for my own pleasure. In fact, I didn't even take slides at first, I just took some snapshots. So some of these aren't wonderful, and some are more wonderful than others. And some actually were taken by other people, and I've collected them. I've written to many people over the years, talked to many people. Sometimes I'll find a real gem of a photo, and I'll take it, get it copied, and then I'll take it, get a slide made out of it. So I've had to do a lot of things to get these together, and then a lot of research. But please keep in mind, I didn't start out years ago with the idea that I'm going to put together one presentation. So if they're not perfect, just understand. I'm not a professional photographer. I just have a lot of fun with it and wanted to share it with everybody. Nancy already touched on how I got started. And let me throw my glasses here. I hope I can manage all this equipment at one time. My husband says I'm not so great with the technical stuff. Anyway, I find some of these places, I sort of sniffed them out. I do have an old list from 1986 of the Jewish Almanac, and a lot of them are listed there, but sometimes they're not listed. And I'll give you a quick example. One time we were driving back from Louisiana, my husband's home state. We stopped in Opelousas for lunch, and we were at a cafe. And there was nothing on my list, and I said, I know there's a synagogue here. He said, oh, no. I know people, Jewish people from Opelousas, there's no synagogue here. I said, no. And if you know your history, and you know certain things, you can put the pieces together. I said, no, there has to have been one if there isn't one, because this is the third oldest city in Louisiana. It's on a river. It is a major trade route. There has to have been one. So we asked the Greek owner of the cafe, he said, oh, sure, it's around the corner. It's 4 blocks. And it turned out to be one of the most beautiful ones that I photographed. It's not in this particular talk, because tonight I'm going to touch on Texas synagogues. I also want you to know I'm not going to touch on every single synagogue, because we have dozens of fabulous ones in Texas. Tonight I've picked out about 14 or 15 to get started with. If you will take a look at the map afterwards, you will see that I have put a little red flag in each of the towns or cities where one of the synagogues is located that I will be speaking about this evening. So what I want to do is get started by, I want to tell you why I love these synagogues and why I break for synagogues. Growing up Jewish, I grew up in a suburb of Milwaukee, and I have other Milwaukee friends here tonight. And I didn't realize that there were so many thousands of people who grew up in wonderful small towns and cities all over America and had wonderful experiences there. And when I found these synagogues, I felt such an affinity. I felt that each one was a home for me. I knew, and I know some of you share this feeling with me, when you go into one of these cities or towns and you see the synagogue, you know you have a home. You may not know anybody in that town, but you know that if you went to that synagogue, you would have a home there. There's always a home. So each one of these is a home away from home for me. It's my Jewish home, even if I don't know anybody in that town. It gives me a great feeling. It's a lot of fun. All right, let me explain these slides. We're going to start out in Jefferson. Let me see if I can get this all flipped around. I'm going to need some light. I hope you can all hear me. Okay, we're going to start out in Jefferson, which is on the eastern part of the state. And if you look up in the corner of the map, you'll see up in the far northeast corner is a flag, and that is where Jefferson is. And this is Hebrew Sinai Congregation, which looks pretty fabulous today because it's actually the Jefferson Playhouse. Jefferson was, today it has a population of 2,200 people, but in its heyday in the mid-1800s, it swelled to 50,000 people. It was the major river port between St. Louis and New Orleans. I read somewhere that there were about 500 Jews living here in its heyday. There were riverboats, gambling, commerce, and culture. This particular building between 1875 and 1900 was the Hebrew Sinai Congregation. The congregation actually was started in 1873. And then they purchased this building. This building was built in 1860. It was designed by an architect, and it wasn't as large as it is now. It originally, I believe, functioned as a stagecoach inn. And then in 1869, it was purchased by a Catholic order and used as a convent. Then 6 years later, it was purchased by Hebrew Sinai Congregation, and the following year, they added on to it. So there would be, I guess, a social hall or meeting rooms, Sunday school, whatever. Then in 1900, things changed, and they decided to, this tells something about it. In 1900, they abandoned the building for use as a synagogue. And what they did is, it was sort of maintained by an endowment fund from some of the old Jewish families. But it really, I've seen pictures of it, it really fell into terrible disrepair as it moved on into the 20th century, into the 20s and 30s. It's not in good shape. And so what happened is the Jesse Allen Wise Garden Club, which has taken over and restored and maintained many of the wonderful buildings of Jefferson, took over the building and restored it in exchange for maintaining the old Jewish cemetery there, which is fascinating also. This tells, of course, something about this, and of course you can see it is on the National Register of Historic Places. It is, as I said, the Jefferson Playhouse, and every year thousands of people come to see the Diamond Beth murder trial. And this production reenacts the final trial in the 1877 murder case of Anne Stone Moore Rothschild in Jefferson. I'll just tell you the story quickly. She was known as Diamond Beth because of her jewels. She was reportedly secretly married to Abe Rothschild, a dandy and son of a Jewish diamond dealer in Cincinnati who was quite well off. 3 days after mysteriously arriving in Jefferson, people don't know why they came there, Diamond Beth disappeared and her body was found 2 weeks later in the woods outside the city. 7 years and 3 trials later, Rothschild was acquitted but left town and went off with his family. And it says it's now maintained by the Garden Club in Jefferson. Something that overtook the Jewish community here, which they could not have known. This is another view. This is the back side, and I think part of the addition. They could not have known that in 1873, as the congregation was forming, that the U.S. government was going to remove the natural log dam that made it possible to have steamboat travel up and down the river. And what happened is all of that dried up, and those of you who have been there know that you can barely get a canoe down that bayou now. It's sort of a natural bayou. Let's see, what else do I want to say about Jefferson? I just kind of touched on maintained today the way it is. We're going to move on to Beaumont. This is the only slide I have of this. I have other photos. This is an absolutely gorgeous building. Beaumont today has a population of 114,000, and yet its Jewish population is declining at a rapid pace. And I don't know if they have merged with Port Arthur, but there has been talk of it if they have not. And they already did merge with a traditional congregation, a more Orthodox congregation in Beaumont. It's Temple Emmanuel. This congregation was founded in 1895. This is the second structure that they had. And it was, as I say, it was built, oh no, I didn't, because it was built in 1925. The congregation was 30 years old. The congregation is reformed and always has been. This particular building is very modern for its time with exquisite Art Deco detail, and notice the rounded octagonal copper roof. It's really gorgeous. Quite an expensive building. Also notice the leaded Art Deco lancet windows. Those are the windows that have the rounded tops that you see across the front. And also it's set off so beautifully by palms and Italian cypress. It just really fits in well in its setting. Also note on the very top there is a spire. It's hard to see. At the very top is a beautiful little monk and David. This also has a historic marker, but I don't think you can see it. Next, we're going to move on to Galveston. Galveston has a couple of congregations. We're just going to talk about B'nai Israel today. This is really a fabulous town, too. Today, Galveston has a population of 61,000, but it was really, also a real moving and shaking town in the 1800s. This congregation was formed in 1868. I started by showing you this marker because I think you can see how monumental this building is when you look at the marker against this. And again, this is not a picture that I took. This is one somebody else took in the Texas Jewish Historical Society. This was a very wealthy 19th century city of Jews. The families were so prosperous that in the 1870s, most charitable monies were dispersed outside the city because there wasn't even a need for it among the community there. It is very Gothic in style. It's a Norman Gothic style, and combined with Moorish features, it's really a gorgeous building. This is not the way it looked. Later on, when somebody else took over the building, they removed a lot of things. They filled in a lot of the windows. I'm going to someday do a slide of it in its glory years, but this is still a fabulous building. This building was built in 1870. It is today the oldest standing structure that has ever been used as a house for Jewish worship in the state of Texas in continuous use. And so it's very notable for that. And of course, architecturally, it's out of this world. Very ornate. It's got fabulous spires, lancet and horseshoe windows. Interestingly, the building was remodeled in 1866 to 1887. It was only a 16, 17-year-old building. The congregation used this building until 1952, so they were in it for 82 years. I have the comments here on Rabbi Henry Cohn, who is so well known in Jewish history, and really any American Jewish history. He was born in London in 1862. He also lived in Cape Town Colony, Africa. He trained as a mohel and a shofet and served in Kingston, Jamaica, and Woodsville, Mississippi as their rabbi before moving to Galveston. Now keep in mind, he did all of this. He then married a Galveston native, Molly Levy. He was really quite a character and very loved and respected. He wore a frock coat with, with removable sleeves upon which he wrote his daily activities. He was known for this. I mean, he didn't walk around with a Franklin planner or an agenda. He wrote on his sleeves, and then they put the frock coat sleeves back on. And he was everywhere. This man was a whirlwind. He did all kinds of good deeds, which included helping new immigrants, prison reform, did circuit riding, rabbinic duties in other places other than Galveston. He published books, and he was fluent in 13 languages. Keep in mind, he was a rabbi in other communities before he came to Galveston. He served the Galveston community for 62 years. What is also interesting, see the building on the left? That is the community center, which is now the Masonic Temple, which was built in 1928 as their community hall. It was named in honor of Rabbi Cohn and in honor of his 40 years of service at the time. Little did they know he would go on to serve an additional 22 years, and he is still very highly revered to this day. and that is called the Cohen Community House. He lived in something called the Rabbinage. They had what other people would call a parsonage. They had a house for him and his wife and family, and it was called the Rabbinage. And after that, there were other places in Texas that built Rabbinages. You get a kick out of that name. All right, we're going to move over a little bit. State, we're going to move not too far away, actually. We're going to move up just a little bit to Baytown. This is Knesset, Israel in Baytown. And the population today of Baytown is actually kind of large. It's about 67,000. This town was typical of Texas oil boom time. It was built in the 20s. And many migrated to Baytown to seek their fortunes. Knesset, Israel is built in the Art Deco modern style times with subtly integrated decorative brickwork. Notice the frieze across the arched top. And by the way, you see that that sort of vaulted or arched top. Inside, it's really terrific because it has a matched barrel ceiling, so it's got that rounded ceiling. And you're going to see a couple more like that too. Also of note are the double doors that are separated by the railing. And I don't know if this was intended to be in the Orthodox fashion, but I'll show you something very interesting. Also notice on the left there is a Texas historic marker on this one. Here are the windows. And there are some Mogan Davids built into the brickworks and some masonry. I don't know if you can see it. And then really some very nice stained glass windows. Now that building to the right, which isn't too attractive, is the social hall. And that also has the double door motif. So I don't know if they were trying to be Orthodox if they went into the social hall or not. Kind of interesting. Next stop, Wharton. This is a really interesting community to me. This is the Texas marker for Knesset, Israel, and Baytown. This is Sheriff Israel in Wharton, and this is quite a town. First of all, the town of Wharton today is 9,000 people. It's never been a whole lot bigger than that. It might have been 10 or 11,000 people. I think it's pretty stable. This congregation was founded in 1913, and originally there were the first Jewish, I don't know if you call them settlers, because I don't know if they stayed that long, but the first couple of Jewish settlers that came through, one of them was a man who actually was born in Copenhagen, Denmark, but he was considered of German descent. We don't find a lot of Danish Jews around, besides Victor Borg. So anyway, he came and opened up a jewelry business there, and his son settled there. This congregation is interesting for a lot of reasons. First of all, the fact that it's located in an area that you would not expect to see a synagogue of this stature or of this nature. Let me move forward a little bit. It is built, and I wish I had an aerial view. From the air, it looks like a shield of David. It is the only one known in America that is in this particular form. It's not a Star of David, it's a shield of David, and I have an aerial drawing of it, which I should take a slide of. Very, very unique. This is, well, let me just tell you first of all a couple things about the congregation. I'll tell you a little bit more about the building. In 1914, Henrietta Zoll of Synanagogues came to Wharton. And the reason she came to Wharton was because she was trying to found Hadassah chapters in Texas. And she went to Houston, and she couldn't drum up enough interest there. And somebody there said, you know, there's a Jewish community, there's some Jewish people out in Wharton. You might want to give them a try. So she went and visited with a couple of the ladies from, I guess, the Hebrew Benevolent Society. And they said, oh yeah, let's start a Hadassah chapter. And so the third oldest Hadassah chapter in Texas is in Wharton. Henry Hill personally visited there. She went to somebody's living room and talked to the ladies. And what happened is on their, I don't remember if it was their 25th or 50th anniversary, Henrietta Zoll wrote them a wonderful letter thanking them and remembering them and congratulating them on the anniversary of their congregation. And that letter is so prized in Wharton that it is kept in somebody's personal safety deposit box, along with the fabulous coleslaw recipe for the Wharton barbecue, which I'll get to in just a minute. This congregation serves Wharton. It also serves El Campo, which is, I think it's about 15 16 miles away, and that's got about 11 or 12,000 people. And Bay City, which is 18,000 people, and is about 18 miles away, and I have visited all of these. And as I said, it is the site of the famous barbecue every June, which I also have attended, and it is in their community hall, which I'm going to show you in just a moment. There's so much to tell you about this one. It's a very major event that they have, and it is really the reunion for all of the Jewish families and the townspeople who are not Jewish. Everybody comes in for this big barbecue that's right there in the community hall here in Morton at the temple. It's a very big deal. It's a lot of fun, and it's just one great big family. And this, though this was actually a sort of a large congregation in an outlying area, it had and to this day, even though it's very much a shrunken congregation, has a family feel to it. They began worshiping in homes around 1899 in this community, and then they rented the bottom of Masonic Lodge on South Rusk Street. In 1909, they purchased land to build, and in 1921, they dedicated their first building. This is not it, of course. In 1940, they built the community hall. I hope that's the next one. No, this is more of the decoration. The new one. I say new, it was built in 1956. Here's their community hall that was built in 1940. So they still have their synagogue in town, and then they have this community hall out on their piece of land, which is quite sizable out on the outskirts of town. Then they went ahead and in 1952, in Jewish tradition, built their religious school. So they did this before they built the new sanctuary. And here's the religious school. So it's three separate buildings, pretty good sized buildings. Unfortunately, they're not in frequent use. In 1960, they also purchased a lot and built a rabbinage for the rabbi and his family, but it's not part of this group of buildings. I should also tell you, this building, I hope I've got another picture of it here. No. The building here has 376 seats, which is remarkable. I mean, we're talking kind of an out there synagogue. This synagogue very much, and this community very much reminds me of being in a suburban community on the outskirts of some large city. It does not seem like it's kind of out there. Another interesting thing is that Bay City, 18 miles away, has the Beth David Center, which is functioned as their Jewish center. And several years ago, somebody wanted to buy the land and offered them so much money, they sold it, and they had all this money in this tiny community, but they built the new Beth David Center anyway because they had all this money. So they have it, and I have been there as well. It's very lovely, but it's not a great use. I want to touch on Rabbi Israel Rosenberg. He was the rabbi for over 23 years, from 1955 to 1978. This man was absolutely a shining light of this community. He traveled from town to town giving Hebrew lessons every week, out to Bay City, out to El Campo, back to Wharton. There were so many dozens of children who were bar mitzvahed and bat mitzvahed in this conservative congregation who would not have had this opportunity but for this absolute, he's another kind of a whirlwind. He also dressed very traditionally. I've seen a number of pictures of him. He wore sort of a mitre, like a bishop would. A very, very traditional look, and really very nice robes and things. Very, very revered. I think I've got one more cute story about Wharton, and then we're going to move on. Joe Schwartz came in 1897, and he had a dry goods store there. He was instrumental in bringing quite a few of his relatives, I mean a lot of his relatives. When one of these relatives, Joe Den, came to show and get approval from Schwartz of the new Ford he had purchased in Bay City, Schwartz commended Den on having come so far in only 1 year in the U.S. But Schwartz inquired, "Why did you buy a Ford? Henry Ford is such an anti-Semite." The innocent dad was so shaken by his response, he managed to jam the car's gears, would only go in reverse, so he can back the Ford up all the way to Bay City, where he traded it in the very next day. Do you remember that it's 18 miles from Wharton to Bay City? That's a long way to back up. In the name of anti-Semitism. Okay. This is a lot of these buildings a lot of these congregations will deconsecrate their building and take their cornerstones with them. And actually, and we have some here. I think Sure Israel has all three of its cornerstones in its current building. In this case, they put it inside the synagogue. We are now in Victoria. We've gone south down to Victoria. Kind of interesting because it's also sort of out there. It has a population of 56,000. This is B'nai Israel. This is also one of the oldest congregations in Texas. It was founded in 1858. I think it's the second oldest, I believe. I think that Israel in Houston was founded, I think, a few years earlier. The original families in this community were all from Alsace-Lorraine. They spoke French and German. They formally reorganized, in quotes I say this, in 1872 and received the Texas State Charter as a Reformed congregation. I don't know what that was about. I just have the information. The first place of worship was above the old telephone building on Main Street, which was later Dunlap's department store. Then they later met in the Masonic Hall. The present temple was built in 1923. The sisterhood was formed in 1871. Notice the double pediment on the front with the Mogan David, and the pillars with the portico. It's really a very nice classical design. It's very traditional style of the late 1800s into the 20th century. It's very attractive, very appropriate for its location, and it has very lovely stained glass windows. You're going to see a few of those in just a second. Here's the inside. And when they did the remodeling, they still had the original bema, and you can see the chairs. They're really Victorian. They're, I'm sure, from the original temple from years ago, 19th century, and they have almost an Eastlake look to them. Let's see what else I want to tell you. In 1986, they remodeled and enlarged the congregation. They added on some rooms. I don't know if it was for Sunday school or for social hall. But the bema and ark are still original. And here's some of the stained glass windows. And I also want you to notice the chairs in the back. You see how they have that shaker look? It's so unusual to see furniture like that in synagogue. And, of course, the wooden pews. So we know this is it was always a Reformed congregation. The ladies migrated around 1899 from Alsace-Lorraine, and they established, 1849, and they established a very substantial banking company, mercantile interests, and so forth. They were probably I don't know if it's safe to say that the wealthiest, if not, one of the wealthiest families in the community. And then other people came, the Levies came, or the Beebe. There were two different families, but both very substantial, very respected, and highly regarded business people in the community. The original lady started the bank back in the 19th century. Banks weren't regulated by the government. Anybody could start their own private bank, and that is exactly what the ladies did, because they had this big safe, and they were requested by people to please keep their money and valuables for them. And so they did build this banking empire, and then it was incorporated, I guess, in 1910, when the government required that banks register with the government. But they had a fabulous business. The community was mostly an agricultural community, and later was an oil transportation crossroads, being equidistant from San Antonio, Houston, and Austin. And here it is again. You can see it's really a substantial building. It goes way, way back. It's a long, skinny building. Very well maintained. Okay, we're going to move on to Schulenburg. And I had to take a picture of the town. My friend Sandy is here with me. She was here when I took these pictures. We could not believe this town. We got to go to Schulenburg because she went to Brenham on business, so we went together. And I'm going to touch on Brenham. If you took down the wind sign and the True Value sign, I'd say this is the perfect backdrop for a movie set. We're going to shoot a movie here someday. And we're going to also probably do the synagogue. You need to see the contrast. These are 2 blocks from each other. I just think this is terribly funny. The town was never very big. The town today is about 2,400 people, and it's always a little Jewish population. But they built this synagogue in what I call baby boom years in 1951. This is Temple Israel. And it's amazing to me that it's still here. It's only open about 2 or 3 times a year. This congregation actually began 17 miles south in Hallettsville. Now, I'll tell you where this is if you don't know where Schulenburg is. If you're driving between San Antonio and Austin on I-10, or is it Houston? Houston, okay. Houston and San Antonio on I-10. Kind of halfway in between. You take a dip in the road a few miles, and that's Schulenburg. And Hallettsville is 17 miles due south on that same road that you take. Hallettsville has 2 Jewish cemeteries. When the congregation started, it met in people's homes, of course, and then as is typical in a lot of places, it met in the Oddfellows Hall. I don't know why, I haven't got the total story on this one yet. I don't know why they built this in Schulenburg. I don't know if it had to do with being closer to the highway or what. Early settlers came from all Central Lorraine and Bavaria and settled in this beautiful agricultural area. Now, I told you the temple is only open 2 to 3 times a year, and it has always functioned with a student rabbi. I want to show you something. I had an amazing experience. I went there first with my friend Sandy, and then another time coming back from one of my Texas Jewish Historical Society meetings, decided to drive through Schulenburg and see if maybe there were some people there. I don't know why I thought there would be, because there never are, and it's always locked. So here we are, other people. I drove up on a Sunday afternoon about 2 o'clock, and there was a car, and I walked in, and there was a lady there, and she was preparing all this food. And again, it's only open twice a year. They were having a stone dedication for 3 graves down in Hallettsville, and all the families were coming back up to their synagogue and getting together. And this is the group. And it's really very interesting. The lady, I can't remember her name, somebody here will know this lady's name. She was lovely. The lady in the center with the white hair and the pastel dress is a native and lifelong resident of Schulenburg. And her family had business interests there. She showed me a scrapbook she keeps of the synagogue, of the temple. And all of the student rabbis, she has a nice scrapbook of them. I will also tell you something interesting. I met a very nice gentleman down in Hallettsville. Some of you may know Mr. Schwartz, and he is the 3rd generation to live in Hallettsville. His son, who is probably in his 40s or maybe 50, lives there. He's an attorney. They're practice together. And the grandson also lives there. So it's all these generations of Schwartz. He told me that his the first Schwartz to come to Hallettsville had come there, he thinks, to escape conscription in the German army or Austrian army, whatever. But though at the time, this is about 5 years ago, the grandson was about to have a bar mitzvah or just had one. They did not have it here because there's no training, there's nothing here. They had to drive all the way down to Victoria to attend the temple, which is probably 60 miles, but he did have the bar mitzvah down there. Also, before we leave Schulenburg, I would tell you that they did have a Jewish mayor from 1963 to 1981. It was Julius Hirsch. A lot of these towns have Jewish mayors, sheriffs, lots of politicians, police officers, or police chiefs. We're in Brenham. Wait a minute, we're still in Morton here. This is, again, this one looks very suburban, and it's out in this little western town that looks like it should be in the movies. They turned on the lights for me because they knew I was going to take a picture. Very nice building. It's very nicely set on its property. We're in Brenham now. And I know Brenham's the home of Bluebell, but if you break for synagogues, it's the home of B'nai Abraham Synagogue. And this is what I call part of the school of little white churches. This is the only one we have that I know of in Texas that's one of these little white churches. That's what I call them. There are others that I photographed around the country. Particularly in small communities, congregations would build a house of worship that would beautifully blend in with the communities in which they were situated. So many of them look like little Baptist churches. And this is one of them. It's very attractive. It looks just right in the town. The population today of Brenham is 12,000. I don't know how many of those cows they have out there producing the ice cream, but this is people. This congregation was founded in 1885. This building was built in 1893. It is not their first building. The first building was built on this site in 1892. It burned, and then 1 year later they built this building. This is believed to be the oldest standing Orthodox Jewish structure in the state of Texas. It was very Orthodox from the very beginning, all the way through its life as a regular congregation. When I went to the Ward Barbecue, I met this very nice gentleman from El Campo who was in his 70s, and he had grown up in Brenham. He said his family moved to Brenham from New York, from Brooklyn, at age 3 in 1927. And I said, oh, so you must have belonged to the congregation in Brenham. And he said, no, it's too Orthodox for my family. Jews began arriving here in the 1840s, and they liked it because it was a German or Lithuanian community. And so people spoke their language. They could get right off the boat, come to Brenham, especially if they had somebody sponsoring them there, and they could speak the language. Services were originally held in a hall of the 2nd Texas Infantry Band. The first synagogue I mentioned was built in 1892. Everything still stands, and it is beautifully maintained by a grandson of one of the original founders, Leon Tobin. There's a center bema, which is kind of interesting. We don't see that too often. A small synagogue of this size. The only thing not standing anymore is the mikvah. You can still see some of the foundation. Note the lancet window and the oculus over the door. That's that round window over the door. My guess is it may have had some kind of lovely stained glass with a David or whatever. I'm not certain. It looks like it. I'll also tell you one cute story. There's a lady I met at one of our Texas historical meetings, and she told me that she had grown up there and that her father, they lived right behind the synagogue. And of course, you always walk to the synagogue. And of course, he would go every day because it's Orthodox, and they went for minyan every single day. And he didn't like having to walk all the way around the block to get to the synagogue, and it was practically in his backyard. So he cut a little hole in the fence, and he put two little hinges on it, and he had a little door. He just opened up the back door, and kind of scoot through the backyard, and there he was at the synagogue. That worked just great for him. And this is also kind of a historical marker of the state of Texas, and you can see it very, very nice. Very interesting also, this is its cornerstone, and there's not any English on it. I've not seen one like that in Texas, except for this one. No English cornerstone anywhere. And this is historical marker. Here we are at Hempstead. Oh, I'm so excited about this one. I am so excited about this one. Anybody who knows me knows about Hempstead. I don't know that much about this. I have to get information. I hope somebody in here will have some information. I was listening to Ed Gale, who's now deceased, from Beaumont, speak at a meeting one time, and he showed some slides, and he showed this picture, he just held it up or something, this picture of the synagogue that he's a descendant of the Schwartz family from Hempstead. And I said, oh, this is such a gem, this is absolutely great. It's the only known picture of this little backyard synagogue. Hempstead is located roughly 45, 60 miles out of Houston. It's northwest of Houston, it's en route to Brenham. And Sam Schwartz was one of the first Jews who came to Hempstead, and he was from Kempen, Prussia. He came in 1866. He didn't come directly from Prussia, though, because he was a Civil War veteran, which was pretty interesting. And he also became a school board member for 20 years. And I'm just going to mention that in 1928, they built the Sam Schwartz Training School there, which was a college to teach Negro teachers. And this was a wonderful project of the Julius Rosenwald Foundation, you know, the fellow on the Spears. They built schools all across the South to help educate Negroes. And this was one that was located there, and it was named after Sam Schwartz. And in fact, they named a bunch of other things after him. Rabbi Heinrich Schwartz was another family member, and he came in 1875 at the urging of the large family that was settled there. They had a very extended, big, extensive family there. He was ordained in Germany. He is said to have had a PhD from the University of Berlin, and he was the rabbi of Hempstead, of their congregation, which was apparently it was in the backyard, according to Ed Gale. It consisted largely of members of the extended Schwartz family. He and his wife wrote poetry and were educated in German, English, French, Hebrew, and Latin. This is out in Hempstead. I want you to notice something else I think is just great on this building. It's a true Victorian. It's just a little dollhouse of a synagogue. It's great. You can see that there are 3 windows going down the side. There are 2 entrances, which is, of course, very Orthodox. But I will tell you that a few weeks ago I was in New Orleans with my husband, and they have so many buildings of this age. And I did see a building on the corner somewhere that had the same exact look with the 2 doors on the corner, and I know it wasn't the former synagogue. So I don't know if that was just the style of the time or if it was just a really terrific Orthodox little synagogue. But it's very, very charming. Also notice the intersecting tracery windows over the front. And those are those sort of arched windows over both the doors and over the front window that have all of that sort of fretwork. And that's a big favorite of mine because it's such a find. A lot of people don't realize there was ever any kind of a building here in Hempstead. We're going to move on to Bryan and Temple Frida. This is in my category of don't let this happen to you. It's kind of interesting. Today, Bryan has a population of 57,000. Now, there is an existing temple, and I'm going to show you at the end. It's the modern one. This particular one, Temple Frida, was built in 1912, and I have been told 2 different things, or read 2 different things about who it was named after, but one thing is for certain, it was named after a woman. It is the only synagogue known to have been named after a woman in the state of Texas, or just about anywhere. Highly unusual then and now. It was built in 1912, named in memory of either, number one, Freda Tapper, the grandmother of the congregation's founder, Max Tapper. And I'm tending to believe that one because his name is on the cornerstone, which I'll show you. Or number two is that it's named for Ethel Frida Kazer, or Kazer, I don't know, somebody here may know the name, whose husband Benjamin was one of Bryan's leading citizens. I do not see that name anywhere else, but I do see the Tapper name, and you will see it on the cornerstone. But it was named after a lady, we know that. The land was donated by John W. English, a non-Jew. And this was not that uncommon in small towns. It was sort of like everybody pitched together and said, let's put on a show, except they said, let's put on a synagogue. And this is, I love this building. This is, to me, another gem. I just love it. This is the classic Greek Revival style, sort of Roman Greek Revival style. It's really great. It's got terrific architectural detailing. Somebody really knew what they were doing. This congregation also was reformed from the beginning, and you can tell by its design. It has that look. It's got sort of what I call a mini colonnade, those two columns in the front with a nice cornice and a tablature above the door. Unusual, too, inside a good-sized foyer for such a small structure, so that it is 60 feet long. It's really very deep. It's 25 feet wide and 60 feet long. It is still owned by the Jewish community in Bryan, but it is used now by a black congregation. I think it must be rented to them or whatever. And here is the cornerstone with the trustees and the building committee. You can see the name of Max Tapper right on there. And apparently his grandmother was the Freda from whom this was named. It's sad to see it in such disrepair, but you know, people don't generally want to spend money on something like that, especially if they have another building. And it's just lovely. Beautiful little building. And this is their congregation today. This is Congregation Beth Shalom. And although I'm sure serves the congregation in much more needed ways, does not have nearly the charm. But there it is, and I'm glad it's there. This is Corsicana, and everybody loves this one. It's another big favorite of mine. Just love it. A lot of you have seen this one. Corsicana today has a population of about 23,000 people. This is Temple Bethel, which was built in 1901. Jews began arriving in 1871 with the Houston and Texas Central Railroad. By 1890, services were held in a store, and then they were held in City Hall. And by 1898, they were held upstairs over Freedman's driveway. Now this is important because Bethel was chartered in 1898, and by 1900, they had a Jewish population of about 500. And there was a Mrs. Freedman of Freedman's Dry Goods who was very instrumental in getting the building built. And I wondered if it was just because she didn't like having all those people traipsing up to the top of her dry goods store for services. This is Corsicana. This was very close to here. This was always a Reformed congregation. It was never intended to be anything else. And the thing that's so surprising about it is that upon looking at this, it looks so Eastern European. It looks so Orthodox. It just smacks of it. It's got a Moroccan influence, and it's very Eastern Orthodox. But I want to talk about some of the architectural features, which are great. It's got twin octagonal bell towers, which are topped with the beautiful onion-shaped domes. And I put in here, the architect did not miss a trick. I mean, there's all kinds of things in here. There's a large oculus over the front door. That's, again, that large round window. It's got the Moses David in it. And it's got the Ten Commandment windows. And these, by the way, were from the studio of Louis Comfort Tiffany. So that's very impressive, and they are still there. It's got multiple pediments. It's got horseshoe windows in the entry doors. It's got an upper gallery, sort of a balcony. But again, remember, this is not Orthodox. That is very unusual. It also has an arched ceiling inside and many, many wooden pews, which it was filled with. One more thing I want to touch on, there is an existing congregation that is conservative or Orthodox there, Agudas Achim, and that was founded in 1915, and that has a more modern building. I don't find it as interesting. Someday I may include it in my talk, but this is so fabulous. I hate to put the other one in. I want to talk about the road walker grave in the cemetery. In 1884, there's this very unusual grave marker there, and it just says the rope walker on it. Anyway, in 1884, a circus performer was in town, apparently with a circus, and he was performing a stunt, I guess for publicity, between two buildings. And this is a stunt in which he carried an iron stove on his back while he walked on tightrope. He did not survive. It killed this acrobat. And he was on the street, and prior to his death, he asked for, they sent a Methodist minister over to, pray with him. And he said, I'm Jewish, get me a rabbi. They didn't have a rabbi in 1884 there, and he said he was a Jew. So a Jewish merchant came over, of which there were many, and they prayed in Hebrew together before the man died. The rope walker grave is in the Hebrew cemetery there, but nobody knows his name to this day. He's just a rope walker, and he's believed to be a Jew. And that's, of course, canon. Okay? Now we are going to move on a little bit. I'm going to show you a few more things here. This is a little bit more, of course, canon. I wanted you to look at the detail. It also has a historic marker. This is the back. Again. Oh no, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention. It has now been in service for quite a few years, and it is now owned by the city of Corsicana, and it is used as a community hall and can be rented out for various occasions by anybody in the community. It can be used for weddings or whatever. So it's a wonderful use. It's kept up fairly nicely, and it's just nice to see it in good use and in good shape. It is it's just a special architectural gem. And again, this is, let's see, we are in Breckenridge. Excuse me, this was Corsicana, that's their historic marker. I get so excited I get lost. I'm talking about, here we are in Breckenridge. I don't know if you know where this is. I know we've had some people who live in Breckenridge talk to the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Breckenridge, if you go west of Fort Worth, and then you go west of Mineral Wells, and then you kind of go up a little bit northwest, there's Breckenridge. It's just kind of out there. It's just kind of a nice little town out there on the prairie. Today, its population is about 5,600 people. This temple was built in 1929. And this is just a very typical oil boom town. Again, Israel in Baytown was built around the same time. A number of these small communities built these in the 20s and 30s in response to the oil boom and the Jewish merchants who came to do business and enjoy the prosperity of these communities. This particular building was designed by Sam Biederman, who is from Dallas, and his granddaughter is a friend of mine. And he also apparently designed the first JCC here, and some of you will know some other wonderful buildings that he designed here. This is basically an oil and railroad boom town. Abilene Jews went here. They didn't have a congregation yet. Most residents were merchants, often with branch stores and branch family in other surrounding towns. It was sort of a Jewish oasis out there west of Fort Worth and east of Abilene. This is a simple modern building of its time with a pediment and two I call them mini towers because they don't go up very high. The building's current use is by a church, and it's no longer owned by the Jewish community. There really isn't one there that I know of. Note the Mogan Davids in the brickwork. It looks like it's masonry on the little mini towers. Inside also was a curved ceiling. The cornerstone, I don't know how they deconsecrated the building or if they did, but the cornerstone is in a museum in Breckenridge to memorialize the Jewish community there. The temple ceased operation in 1979, so it was active for about 50 years. I'll show you one parting shot of that. It looked a lot nicer. We actually have an old picture in our archives of the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, the original design, and it was great. Okay, we're almost done. We're moving through West Texas here now, and we're going over to Abilene. This is very unusual. When I drove up and saw this, I thought, this is great. This is so appropriate to this community. It has a real mission style. It's very southwestern looking. It's just very appropriate. I want to tell you first of all, about the name Mizpah. It's not mitzvah, it's Mizpah, M-I-Z-P-A-H. Mizpah is, it's like one of those coins that is split in two when two people are going to be parted, and each one takes a piece of it. And when they are back together again, they reunite and put the pieces of their coin together. That is what a Mizpah is. And you will see the significance of naming this congregation that in a moment. This original charter was in 1941. There had been Jews in the late 19th century and a few in the 20s and 30s, but there was a small community of Jews there that met in people's homes. met in Sweetwater and various places. All of a sudden, in 1941, 1942, it was urgent that there was some kind of synagogue in Abilene, because World War II was on, and Camp Barclay was going to have thousands and thousands of men and women stationed at that base, and there were hundreds of Jewish soldiers there from all over, and this little community wanted to serve the Jews of Camp Barclay. So this was founded in the early 40s, and during the war, this is a wonderful story. In 1944, the Women's Auxiliary Group of Temple Mizpah, which has never had more than about 100 members total, it's 100 people, decided to do a Seder for the soldiers of Camp Barclay. And so this group, they got a mess hall, and they requisitioned all new pots and pans, utensils, dishes, and glasses, so that it would all be kosher for Passover, because they had never been in use before. And these ladies served 1,100 men Passover Seder, including 2,500 hand-rolled matzo balls. Another really great thing about this is that this congregation has such a drive and such a will to get this congregation built that they raised all the money, the $12,000, in a very short period of time, and they decided to build the building in 2 months so it would be ready for the high holidays. But they didn't do that. They built it in 1 month. 1 month ahead of schedule. And it was dedicated by a very loved and respected Episcopal pastor, clergyman in town. Note the unusual mission style and the architecture that is combined with the stone facade. I also want to mention that the Torah was first used by Abe and Ike Levy of our city of Sweetwater. They later donated it to Temple Mizpah, which is really great. Many families moved in and out of this community, as they still do, though the membership has remained stable, and that's because today of Dye's Air Force Base. Notice the double pedimented front with a small arcade. Let me show you a couple more. It's very simple and much in tune with this location. I also want to mention Dallas' Aaron Klausner, who some of you may have known, served as the lay rabbi here for 45 years, from 1945 until 1990, and he showed up on all the high holidays and for many services and led the congregation. And then, even though he was not a rabbi, he was always thought of as the rabbi of Abilene. I know that there were student rabbis there, but Aaron Klausner was really the rabbi of Abilene. I want to read you a wonderful letter written by the mother of a serviceman back on October 6, 1943. Dear Congregation Mizpah, I received a letter from my son, Lieutenant Robert D., in which he explained all about how he was treated. Also, all our boys in the Army, and on behalf of my husband and myself, we wish to thank you so much for making the Rosh Hashanah holiday so much like home to them. It is hardly believable that so much can be done in so little a community, yet our Jews have always stood out, thank God. Here's hoping you all have a happy, healthy, and prosperous New Year, and have our prayers answered so that we can all have our loved ones back with us once more. Respectfully yours, Mrs. M. Lunsford, and she was from Brooklyn. A very lovely letter. Okay, let me show you a couple more things about Temple Mizpah. I'll show you the backside. This is Cornerstone. In memory of Ben Cohen, came up with a lot of the money and a lot of the support to do this. Again, here it is. And you can see up at the top, you see the little piece of stonework or masonry, and that has Temple Mizpah in it. I mean, it just says Mizpah in the Mogen David. And here's the backside. So it's stone all the way around, the stone facade. It's really cute. It's great for its location. It's right. Okay, now we're in San Angelo. This is Congregation Beth Israel. And this has never had any affiliation. It was founded in 1913, and of course there were some Jews that were there in the 19th century, particularly with the during the heyday of Fort Concho there, which is also a very interesting place to visit if you ever go there. Go on a tour of Fort Concho. They still have services every Friday night at 7:30 and high holiday services. This was originally organized with 10 families in 1913, although some Jewish families have been meeting since 1884. The building is very high off the ground to protect the Torah from flooding. There's been quite a bit of flooding there. And in fact, when I was there, they had just completed redoing the social hall, which is downstairs. This is San Angelo, Texas, and that's, if you look at the map over in the corner, it's the second from the left. So we're getting kind of far out there. You know, there's a lot of places I haven't even touched on, but this is really kind of an equal community. They do meet every Friday night, and you know, about 12 people might show up or whatever. But it's just kind of a place they congregate. And services are read by a lay leader. I want to read one more. I want to mention one more thing, and I got to read a very true story about how they acquired the land. They had only one rabbi at this congregation, a full-time rabbi, and his name was D.L. Schneerson, from 1951 to 1971. And he had come to the U.S. from Russia before World War II, and got sent out to San Angelo, and that's where he lived until he died. So it's really very nice that they did have a rabbi during that time. This came from Suzanne Campbell, who's a historian. She lives in San Angelo, and she knows everything about San Angelo. She's a great lady. She found this story about, quote, Rabbi Dave Goldman and the synagogue. He wasn't really a rabbi, he was a lay leader. H.C. Henry Ragsdale, a San Angelo businessman, approached Rabbi Dave Goldman, a local Jew, who served as the unofficial head of the Jewish congregation at the time. Ragsdale explained to Goldman that he wanted to give land for the construction of a synagogue. Goldman was taken by surprise, but was delighted. At home, his wife told him not to accept the offer. She didn't trust those Christians. Rabbi Dave checked the reaction of others and was decided to accept the generous offer. Goldman was nevertheless confused by the offer. Finally, he went to his friend Henry Ragsdale and asked why he wanted to build a synagogue. Well, you know, Jesus was a Jew. Yes, Goldman replied. Well, we believe that Jesus is going to come again someday. Yes, I knew that too. Well, Jesus spoke Hebrew. I figured that when he comes back, we are going to need you folks around to translate for us. That's the community of San Angelo and the surrounding area has a synagogue. I shouldn't really spoil the party, but I will tell you that Barbara Rosenberg, the former president of the Texas Jewish Historical Society, is native of San Angelo. In her possession, she has a copy of the deed for which money was paid. I'll show you a few more pictures of this. We're going to go. This is still San Angelo. This is taken another time of day. You can see the stained glass windows. I wish I had a good shot from the inside. They are really beautiful, really pretty. Again, it's got the lancet windows, wonderful masonry, Moken Davis. Very nice. Very nice, very typical, very modern for its time, 1928.
Sherry?
Yes.
You know why there's a circle inside Star David?
I didn't even notice.
You?
Tell us.
No.
Oh, no.
Circle inside
Let's
the
see.
star.
Go back. Take a look.
It's clear and early.
Oh, was it earlier?
Yeah, it's like keep going.
I don't know. It's a good question. Very observant. I don't know. If somebody finds out, tell me. I'm always trying to add to the information. We're going to move on now to Midland. If you look at the map, it's the farthest west flag I have in this particular talk. It's our last one of the evening. I have loads more. But, this is Temple Bethel in Odessa, Midland, Odessa. They're about 14 miles apart, and their whole community is served by this one congregation in Odessa. And its actual name is Temple Bethel of the Permian Basin. We got a lot of Temple Bethels. It's the only one of the Permian Basin. It was founded in 1946. About 20 Jewish families gathered for religious events at the Midland Bombardier Base. That's where they would go for holidays. In 1945, they founded Temple Bethel, the only congregation in a 140-mile radius. And this is still true today. And there's a very lovely family that some of you may know, the Winkler family out in Fort Stockton, Texas. And this is their congregation. And I asked her one time, I said, well, isn't it a long way to come? She said, oh, not from out here. It's only 85 miles. We don't think about it. When you're out there, 85 miles is nothing. They have congregants from New Mexico, from all over, just from all over. There's nothing else around. And it has never been any particular thing. They have a constant influx and outgo of people in their community. And right now it's remained constant at about 90 families, but there's a little bit of growth in this community. It's kind of interesting. People come and go for various reasons and for business. There just really isn't anything out there except that there are about 90 to 100,000 people in each Midland and Odessa, and the whole surrounding area of the other little communities is about 250,000. It's about 250,000 people. So who knows what will happen here, but it seems to be very solid. It's not big, but it's Wisconsin. This serves all groups, and I went to a meeting here, and we went to services here, and I want to tell you, well, here's, this is the cornerstone for this particular building, but they deconsecrated their old building and put the cornerstone in this same 1961 building as well. This is from the 1946 building, which was also in Odessa. And here is the Heritage of Odessa Foundation marker. And this is inside. There's people in here because they have services, and they have a student rabbi who comes in twice a month, and they had a terrific rabbi when I was there a year or two ago. I guess it was about a year and a half ago. A guy from Argentina. Really wonderful young rabbi. Very delightful, great singer. And it's really interesting. When they have the student rabbi come, they put them up in their homes. And he also has a car to drive because one of the congregants owns a car dealership. And so each time they come, when he comes, he drives any of a variety of different used cars. But at least he has a vehicle to drive, which you need in West Texas. Oh, wait, I want to say one more thing about that that's really terrific. See the light coming through the windows? That's natural light. That's coming from the outside. It's really very nicely designed. It gets a lot of light in there and really lights up the modern windows. And when we were there, you can even see Jim Alexander, a little bit of him in there. There were Orthodox people, I mean, definitely Orthodox, definitely Reformed, definitely Conservative. It serves the whole community. And they have a youth group, too. Very nice. And this, I'm going backwards. This will complete our tour. And this, Harry Leventhal, who is from here, from Dallas, lives there, is married, and has children, and is a member of the congregation. He was president at the time. The fellow in the middle of the sort of the lay leader, I don't know what his name is. And that is Javier on the right, who was their wonderful student rabbi who would come down from Cincinnati a couple times a month. So they built a very nice community there. Can we use some light? Really on the way out, you know, it's kind of a flat place. So some of these I know are going to close. Some of my homes are away from home. And some are going to keep on going, just like the last temple that we saw. But there are now new sparks that are lighting new Jewish flames out there, new congregations forming. And I hope that we'll keep a light in our hearts for all of these Jewish homes away from home. I want to thank you all for having me. And I also want to tell you that the Texas Jewish Historical Society has created a series of note cards of which I believe all of these are included, and they are available at the Source Gift Shop here at the JCC, or I have order blanks, or I even have a few here tonight, but you can get them at the gift shop here when it's open. Thank you again.
I can't wait until next year when we're going to try to get Sherry to come back into other areas. Before we stop, I want to thank Gertrude Miller for doing our wonderful publicity for this event. And Ruth Anders would like one more word with you. Maybe it's to sell tickets, but then it might not be, so stick around.
Since I was doing such a hard sell, I want to let you know that this wonderful program is one of our trusts in the Dallas Jewish Historical Society. Our mission, of course, is to collect, to document, to preserve, to store Jewish history of those people who live in Dallas, Texas. We have an office. It's around, if you go outside to the right of the source, across from the source. It's in the back of the library. And we are welcoming all of you to come anytime by calling, make an appointment. We have an archivist. We would love for you to bring your materials that you would like us to have stored for posterity. So let this organization grow as well as in every respect. And we really welcome all of you. We want you to have refreshments afterwards. And again, we do want you to join and come back. Thank you so much.